Hello and welcome to another edition of Issues and Answers. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll be taken along the journey of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, the ECSC, as the court celebrates its 50th anniversary, 50 proud years of sterling service to the Eastern Caribbean, a significant achievement indeed. I'm proud to have with me and to welcome the Chief Justice of the ECSC, Her Ladyship, the Honorable Dame Janice and Pereira, who will tell us about the ECSC over the past 50 years and some of the celebratory activities that the court is undertaking to mark this significant achievement. Welcome, Your Ladyship.
Thank you very much. I am happy to be here today, and of course, I am happy that we are able to speak to all the listeners across the region and St. Lucia.
Your Ladyship, before we get into the weightier matters of the court, please allow me to indulge you for a few seconds. In 2013, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court announced the conferment of the prestigious honor of Dame Commander of the Order of British Empire upon you, and you were originally called to the bar of the British Virgin Islands in 1981, and you became a High Court judge in 2003. You were promoted to the Court of Appeal in 2009 before being appointed as Chief Justice in 2013, creating history as being the first female Chief Justice since the establishment of the ECSC 50 years ago. What is really your function, your role as Chief Justice?
The role of Chief Justice is basically where you are responsible for the administration of the courts across the Eastern Caribbean, which makes up the jurisdiction of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. There are six independent states and 3 British Overseas Territories. They comprise Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Grenada, and of course Anguilla, Montserrat, and the territory of the Virgin Islands. And so there are high courts established in all of those islands. Perhaps there are courts in the criminal jurisdiction as well as the civil jurisdiction. In many of the states we have complements of between 2 to 4 judges. In the smaller states, they may be manned by a single judge, for example, in Anguilla. And also for Montserrat, they are manned by a single judge at this point. In addition to that, my function is also one where I am able to sit as a senior judge on the high courts in all of the 9 states, and I am also president of the Court of Appeal, which is an itinerant court. It comprises 5 other justices of appeal at the moment, and myself as Chief Justice, and we sit from state to state during the course of the year.
Now, in the various jurisdictions, you have the High Court, the Commercial Court, etc. But what really is the role and function of the ECSC?
The function of the ECSC is really the administration and delivery of justice across the 9 member states and territories. That is its core function, to administer justice impartially, accountably, and in an efficient manner for the people of the Eastern Caribbean.
The ECSC was established 50 years ago, February 27th to be precise. I'm sure that was no easy feat. What did it take for us to have arrived where we are today?
I think when one looks at the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, it's a body, in essence, which is a supranational body. It was established by the Supreme Court order of 1967. It was clearly contemplated at the time when the Eastern Caribbean, those islands that were heading towards independence, it began first as the West Indies Associated States Supreme Court. And as those islands became independent, then it was styled the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. And at first, I think a smaller court, we had itinerant judges on the High Court. In fact, I recall when I commenced my legal practice in 1981, in the territory of the Virgin Islands, there was no resident judge. We shared the judge with Anguilla, as well as Montserrat, and of course, it was whereby the courts would sit perhaps for 2 weeks at any time within a year. Over time, that has changed substantially, where the courts sit year-round in all the states, in the criminal jurisdiction, in the civil jurisdiction, and now we have gone as far as creating divisions, specialized divisions in terms of commercial divisions. There's a commercial division, as you know, in the territory of the Virgin Islands, and there's one operating here in St. Lucia. We also have the criminal division, which operates in most of the member states, even if not necessarily specifically styled, but where we have judges who deal solely within a state with regard to the criminal matters before the court, and they run in tandem with judges dealing with civil matters. So the courts themselves have increased. The cadre of judges, they have also increased. We have seen where we are served with masters, which deals with matters which are interlocutory before a matter comes on for trial. And about 2 years ago, we introduced a criminal master for the criminal division in St. Lucia, and with plans for rolling that out across other member states that will help the criminal division in terms of efficiency.
Well, these can be considered notable achievements, but I'm sure there might be some challenges that the court is still trying to grapple with today. What are some of those challenges, and how do you intend to address those going forward?
Yes. There have been, I think, challenges always with the court. I think, as we know, as societies grow and as persons become aware of their rights, be it fundamental rights or just their civil private rights as against citizen and citizen, and there is access to justice, and they are aware that they can go to a court for the resolution of a dispute, what you find is an increase in the number of matters that will come before the court. And so the challenges have been that invariably our physical facilities and indeed the funding hasn't kept pace with the development of the court and the strides that the court has made. And not only that, but basically the expectations of what the public should have in the delivery of their justice system. I think if we take, for example, currently the state of St. Lucia, where I think persons recognize that our courts are basically in temporary facilities, and we do not have those facilities that are purpose-built that will enable and enhance the efficiency of the courts at this point. That has been more or less ongoing throughout many of the states, and it continues to be a problem. And it is hoped that these are matters that will be grappled with, because it really impacts on how efficient a court can be, particularly where the court needs to move to the use of modern technology if it is to remain competitive. And it ought to be looking to be competitive like any other business.
Okay, we are due for a break. You are watching Issues and Answers. When we come back from the other side of the break, we'll be looking at some of the celebratory activities and events to mark the court's 50th anniversary.
How do I decide which telecommunications service provider to use?
When choosing a mobile, landline, cable TV, and internet service provider, or changing the one you currently use, here's what you should think about in order to get the best service to meet your needs. Why do I need the service? What is the quality of service offered? What are the rates? Are there hidden charges? How much can I afford to pay for the service? What are the customer service obligations of the provider? Not satisfied with the service? The choice is yours whether or not to use the service.
This message is brought to you as a public service announcement by ECTEL, the NTRC, and this station.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned. My guest is the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Her Ladyship, the Honorable Dame Janice M. Pereira. And we will be discussing in this segment some of the celebratory activities and events that the court will be undertaking in celebration of its 50th anniversary. I've been told it's a year-long celebration.
Yes.
Yes. But before we get into some of those activities, I think before the break we were talking about the advent of technology and how the court has found it necessary to keep abreast with technology. Perhaps you'd want to expound on this a little more.
Very well, certainly. In terms of technology, the court is looking to use many aspects of technology in terms of communication. Currently, we do from the headquarters as well as many of the courts, video conferencing of matters. We also use telephonic conferences. Importantly though, I think that it is necessary for our case processing, the mapping of our cases, to be done electronically, and the court has just begun to institute that an e-litigation portal for that purpose. What it will engage is e-filing of matters, additionally e-processing, e-service of claims before the court, and the ability to store, retrieve that information, which coupled with telephonic conferences, hearings, should be able basically to enhance greatly the speed with which the court can get a matter from the start of a claim through to trial, and through from trial to disposition by a decision or a judgment, through the appellate processes and through to the final court of appeal in a lesser time than it now takes. That's one reason. The other reason, I think, as the recent storms have shown, where we know that many of the court's paper documents, for example, in those affected islands, such as the Virgin Islands, Dominica, have been destroyed, the ability to get back up and running with a system that is electronic and which is backed up, that can be retrieved with ease. We have seen that. For example, that's one of the reasons in the Virgin Islands, the commercial court was able to get up and running so very quickly. We were able to retrieve that electronic data and be able to run those systems. Additionally, the feature that we have put in place, which is a rudimentary e-filing process by email to allow that court to operate and function, has been proving by the just the information from persons using it, they consider it to be more efficient than the court was before. So I think that demonstrates the need to move to a system that is more resilient in relation to disasters when they happen.
Now, Your Ladyship, the court has been celebrating its 50th anniversary. To capture the theme, celebrating the past, embracing the future, some activities have gone, but as I said earlier, it's a year-long program of activities.
Yes.
So perhaps you would want to share with us some of those activities or events.
Very well. As you know, we started out in February, when the court actually celebrated the anniversary this year. And that started with a special sitting of the court, which took place in the state of Antigua and Barbuda. We had there an exhibition as well as a lecture. And we had church services across the various states. So the court basically sat at that time throughout the 9 member states for the opening of that session. We have had essay and poster competitions involving children in the schools across the 9 states, and we had award ceremonies marking those persons who were winners in that essay and poster competition. We've also seen here in St. Lucia, for example, where there was a very successful mediation campaign which went on for an entire month, and where at the end of the day, persons, I think, were more familiar with the uses of mediation and the way that mediation can assist them in the resolution of disputes. It is an area that the court very much views importantly as an alternative method to dispute resolution, which is faster, more amicable, and of course less costly. And so it was a really great success story coming out of that mediation campaign. The other states, for example, have had fun sports days in terms of creating relationships between the bench and the bar, other members of the justice system, the Crown Prosecution Services, the police, the registrars, the magistracy across the states. Others are still planning certain celebrations. For example, in St. Kitts, I think there are plans for an award ceremony and dinner, as well as an exhibition there. We had an exhibition going on here last week, during the entire week at the Center for the Mayor's Center in Castries. And so each state has been really putting on various activities. Unfortunately, many of the activities for Dominica was planned around the opening of the law year in that state, and they had to be postponed because of Hurricane Maria, which has now really devastated that island. It is our hope that at some point before the year ends that we are able to celebrate in Dominica in relation to the courts. But I just wanted to mention one, I think, which was unique, and this is something that the state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines came up with, and that is they did a soup kitchen, which was interesting in that they were really reaching out to the poor and the vulnerable within society. And the court, of course, must be able to reach and to ensure that there is equal access to justice for the vulnerable, the poor, and the weak within our society. And that is the point, I think, that that particular focus demonstrated in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Well, your leadership have been shown that we have just a few minutes left, so perhaps I would give you a chance to just say a few final words.
Very well. I would like to really thank all of the persons across our OECS region who have been celebrating with us since we started the celebrations in 2017 from February. And to say that the court as an institution is a vital institution in relation to the rule of law. We are persons within our Caribbean region where the rule of law is vital to our economies, it is vital to our democracies, and we find ways of ensuring that our courts continue to function to the best of the ability, despite whatever the challenges or there may be for the court sitting and going forward. There is, I think, a bright future in relation to the administration of justice going forward for the next 50 years and beyond. And we thank you for the service we have been able to render.
Well, this is all our time on Issues and Answers today. My guest has been the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Her Ladyship, the Honorable Dame Janice M. Pereira, and we've been talking about the 50th anniversary of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Until next time, I'm Julita Peter, wishing you a wonderful day.